You know, 10 years ago, I was 10 years younger, and I was also a little bit dumber and really had the go fast in me. I had turned up the fuel rate on my diesel engine and was about halfway up my first steep mountain pass when I melted the piston. That's right, I ruined that motor because I was trying to turn it up a little bit and went a little too far. Well, in today's episode, I'm going to show you how to install a gauge that will give you the information you need so that you can take your bus right to the limit without crossing the threshold of disaster. And that gauge is called a pyrometer. Some people will call it an EGT gauge. It's all the same. We're going to be putting one on this bus so that I can turn up its performance and have the information I need to make sure I don't take it too far. If you're the kind of person that likes to know what's going on under the hood or has plans on modifying their bus's engine, you're not going to want to miss this episode because this is the gauge that'll let you do that and still hold on to some peace of mind. My name's Chuck Cassidy. Meet you at the welding table. Before we get too far in today's project, I want to take a moment and let you know that Chuck Cassidy is brought to you by the Bus Fair. It's happening this June in Oak Ridge, Oregon from the 22nd to the 25th. I'm going to be there, my friends will be there, and all of your future friends are waiting for you there. So get your tickets today at thebusfair.com. Don't be a stranger. It's going to be a good time. Well, as is custom in these parts, we're going to start off by talking about the tools and materials you'll need if you want to take this job on yourself. And there ain't many of them, so you're in luck. Of course, we're going to start by talking about the gauges. This is a pyrometer made by Autometer. And the reason I went with Autometer is because they are an established brand. They're well known. They're a little more expensive than the cheap Chinese versions, but not the most expensive. And what I really like is that they have a set of gauges that give me all the information I need because this isn't the only gauge I'm adding and I want them to match. So I've actually got 4 of their gauges that I'll be installing, even though today we're mostly only going to be talking about the pyrometer. While we're at it, I will be adding a boost gauge. This will tell us the amount of turbo boost that the engine is experiencing at any given moment. This is a really useful tool for diagnosing situations where you have a loss of power. Loss of power is almost always going to be accompanied by a loss of boost, and if you get used to knowing where your engine runs normally, you'll know when things are starting to go south, so to speak. A lot of times, if you need to change your fuel filter, one of the first places you'll see that showing up if you're not experiencing the loss of power in terms of what you feel in the seat of your pants, it'll be decreased boost pressure because you're not getting as much fuel through the engine, which means the turbo's not supplying as much boost. And these are really quite cheap. These are a relatively cheap gauge and they're super easy to install. The pyrometer, on the other hand, is a little more advanced. Because this unit has a probe right here that is inserted into the stream of exhaust gases, it gets extremely hot. This gauge has an operating range up to 1600 degrees. Now, hopefully we'll never see temperatures that high in our engine, but that does mean our install has to play nice with those high temperatures. The sender itself, which is this guy here, is a little probe, and what we will actually be doing, there are many ways you can install it, but in my opinion the best way to install it is before the turbo. So the exhaust coming out of the engine will be in the manifold and then goes to the turbo. We're going to tap right there, right before the turbo, and we are going to drill a hole and tap it and thread this in directly. Now you can go post turbo if you like, but that's going to give you a reading that's not as precise but still fairly reliable. And in the instructions for this gauge, they outline several other methods for installing it if you want to pursue them. It's up to you, it's your bus. The main goal is we want the information that this is going to give us. So however you get there, we just want to get this in that exhaust stream. Outside of that, everything is fairly straightforward. There's a couple electrical connections to make. You want to make sure you read and follow the directions very precisely when you're making those connections. For example, the length of wire on this thermocouple cannot be altered. So if you didn't read the directions, you might cut that extra wire off and that would mess up your gauge's accuracy, and that'd be a crying shame because you wouldn't find out till after you'd already installed it. So that covers the gauges that we'll be adding. Where are we going to put these darn things? You know, I mean, there's not exactly, you know. Well, no fear. You can get these all over the place because most gauges use the same size hole, either 2 1/16 or 2 1/8. It's all the same. They just get, for some reason, advertised differently, but they are the same size, 2 1/16, 2 1/8, doesn't matter. As long as you're in that ballpark, you're gonna be good. So this is a 4-gauge, universal kind of mounting plate. It was, I think, 20 bucks or something on Amazon. This is what's gonna hold the gauges, and like I said, I'm adding some additional gauges aside from these two. I'm adding a secondary water temperature gauge so that I can know the temperature of the engine coolant, and I've also added a transmission temperature gauge. So much of keeping your diesel engine alive is making sure that the heat created by the engine doesn't destroy it. And the only way to keep track of that is to install gauges that you know you can trust. And I frankly have a hard time trusting some of the built-in gauges that these buses come with, and that's why I'm installing a second water temperature gauge, because I don't love the one in the dash. It doesn't have a very good resolution. You kind of have to guess where your engine is at. And for an engine that costs $10,000 to replace, I don't like guessing. I don't know about you. So this is where we will mount the gauges inside this. It's gonna be right there, kind of under the little vents right below the windshield there. You'll figure something out for your bus, I'm sure. That covers the materials that we'll be using to install these. Let's talk about some tools, and you really only need one specialty tool. That tool is a drill bit and tap. Like I said earlier, we're going to be tapping into the cast iron exhaust manifold of this bus's engine, which is a little intimidating, so we want to make sure we get it right. We know that the probe here is threaded to a 1/8 inch National Pipe Taper thread pitch here. Really standard size. So you can go online and you can buy, that's right, a 1/8 inch National Pipe Taper tap and the corresponding drill bit for drilling the hole. And if you've never drilled and tapped before, this might not be the time to learn because it is fairly high stakes. But the general process is this: you chuck your drill bit up into your drill, you drill that hole as carefully and perfectly vertical and perpendicular as you can, and then you very carefully follow that with the tap. And the tap has threads in it that it cuts into the surface, which then gives you a nice female threaded connection for you to thread the probe into. And of course, because we'll be doing some electrical, you want to make sure you have, all the usual electrical tools. However you like to do it. I'm a heat shrink butt connector kind of guy. It's fine, whatever you want to do, partner. Without further ado, let's take it over to the bus and get cracking. Let me bring you in here and show you where we're at. So I've removed the doghouse cover to my engine. You may or may not have to do that, depending on your bus. And right here, you can see, this is our exhaust manifold right here. And the place that we're going to be tapping is right here. You can see we've got the turbocharger, so this is where all the exhaust collects right before it goes through this flange and enters into the turbocharger. I'm gonna try to get it right in this valley. I even took my punch and just punched a little hole where I want to start my drilling, and I'm gonna drill through. Now we have to be very careful because we want to try and avoid getting metal shavings into our turbo. It's something that I am concerned about, but not that badly. I'm going to use a vacuum and put some grease on my drill bit. Thanks people on the internet for that tip. As I drill in and try to keep the shavings out of there. And when we start the bus, of course, I'm not gonna rev it because I don't wanna spool this thing up super fast. I want those chips to kind of blow out of there. And once that's drilled, we can tap it. Once it's tapped, we can thread our probe into there. This is what we got here. And I think I'm gonna take the probe and put it in kind of like this and get those wires out and away from this hot area basically as quickly as I can. So let's go ahead and have some fun drilling, shall we? Okay, look at this, look at this. I got some grease in here, I got some grease on the tip. We're gonna just go nice and slow, and once we feel like we're getting close to breaking through, I'll kick on the old suck tube and see if we can get some of those shavings out. But in the meantime, let's just drill a hole in some expensive stuff, shall we? If I can get the drill in there, I mean, for crying in the mud, just, there's a, right, and there's a spot there. There we go, okay. Where were we? I had my little, there we go. Did we like it? I think that's where we were. Yep, that's the spot. How straight are we? Straight enough? Is it working? I can't tell. Seems like maybe. Yes, it's working. Okay. Easy does it. Let's see how we did. Let's see what kind of threading we get there. Okay. All right, I'm gonna start it up and hopefully it'll blow some of those chips through. Maybe it'll blow some out of the hole too. Let's do that here. Okay, I think everything's gonna be fine. Oh my gosh. All right, so we got our little insert. That's gonna thread into the hole we just tapped. And then our thermocouple probe is gonna go into that. So this is going right in there. And then I think the hard part is over, but I don't wanna speak too soon. I really, really don't. Hopefully I can get my wrench on there reasonably well. Oh yeah, we're good. And we'll just bottom that out nicely. Nothing too crazy. There we go. No trouble. We don't want any trouble here. That feels good. Okay, maybe just a little more. Okay. Whew. Now we must choose which way we want to route our cables because we want to keep these wires away from all the heat in here. We've got the turbo, the exhaust manifold. You know, it's getting hot in here and it will continue to get hot in here. I think we're gonna run the wires maybe out and up. It seems like the smart thing to do. What if we did it like, could we do it like this? Yeah, I like that. Okay, we're gonna run it like that. All right, well, the turbo didn't explode, and we are tapped, and we got our probe in there, and I'm gonna wire this into position. Let me just show you what's going on here. Okay, we're drilled and tapped in, we've got our probe inserted, and then I think what I'm gonna do is get a piece of wire, baling wire, and tie this around this little eyelet so that it's up and out of the way of everything. And then all we have to do is wire these up and install our gauge, and hopefully we'll be good to go. And I might go ahead and throw that the turbo boost gauge in up there. There's a little spot for it, way up there. All right, now it's time to make up the electrical connections to the probe. And they are bolted connections. You can see these little eyelets here. The kit comes with, where did I put that? It comes with this heat shrink tubing. Voila. And this is, of course, to protect these connections. So we're going to go ahead and slide this on now, you know, before you make the connections. Always a good idea. Ask me how I know. There it goes. But what we're not going to do is heat shrink this right away, because we want to make sure that these connections are functioning properly, you know, before we fully commit on that level. And now we're just going to bolt these together. Look at that, look at this, look at that. I like so. Nope, no. Yes, 5/16. Here we go, okay, we're good. Everything's fine, we're all fine, everything's fine. Okay, yep. Get that out of there. We'll slide this over, but we're not going to shrink it yet. Bring it all the way up. That seems pretty good. Where does that end? Yep. We're going to go right there. I don't know about you, but drilling and tapping into cast iron exhaust manifolds bolted onto your engine, like, that's just not. Whew. Breathe deep. It's behind us now, and I don't think we ruined anything. Mission accomplished. Next up, we're going to be installing the sender, I guess you would call it, whatever, the tap for our all mechanical boost gauge. The pyrometer, right, that's electric. We had wires, okay? The all mechanical gauges, and they're out there. My water temperature gauge is all mechanical. You might have an all mechanical oil pressure gauge. They work by actually having some type of mechanical linkage to what they're measuring. And in our case, that's going to be this little tube that pipes the boost pressurized air from the intake off of this pipe there up to our gauge. And it's just a regular old like pressure gauge. And the way we'll do that is install this guy. I don't know, I'm gonna, yep, look, it focused. This is going to thread into a pre-installed port on our intake, which is actually pretty common. It's a lot more common to have provision for a boost gauge on your intake than it is to have a provision for a thermocouple or a pyrometer on your exhaust manifold. So this is going to be really simple, low stress. We'll install this, we'll use a little bit of thread locker, or not thread locker, thread sealant, and then we'll just run this little hose up through my hole for all my gauge wires and stuff and into the back of the gauge itself. Fantastic, huh? And for those of you wondering why I didn't use any thread sealant on the pyrometer sender, there is just, as far as I know, there is not a thread sealant out there, and I'm sure there is, now that I'm saying it on the internet, there isn't one out there that can handle 1600 degrees. I'm sure there is. I just don't know about it. And maybe I should have used it, and you know what? We can always come back and add it. Hard part will be behind us, you know? So we're all gooped up. Check this out, I'll give you the money shot. International, thank you, left us a little port here. I already removed the plug. And this guy is just gonna thread on in. By the way, This True Blue, it's pipe dope, right? Pipe thread sealant. Sealador de roscas. And I like it because it's vibration resistant. You can use it on petroleum, natural gas, gasoline, diesel, propane, all those, water, whatever you want. And, it's blue, which is cool, like that. And because it's vibration resistant, I feel like it's a great match for things like this, where you're doing, stuff on the go. Okay, that's installed. We will now give a little goop on this guy. Don't want to lose any air because, turbo, that's our power. Hi, buddy, yep, and then you just want to go in there? Beautiful. Look away, I'm using a crescent wrench. I know, I'm supposed to be better than that, but I'm not. I'm really not. I'm French, I like croissants. And when I found out they make a croissant wrench, I was like, gotta have that. If they made a pain au chocolat wrench, dang, buddy, I'd be first in line for that thing. Are we tightened? Click. Yeah, one more. Click, click, click. Perfect. Love it. Okay, carefully now, because there's a little olive in here. Yeah, a little brass. Look at this tiny little, it can't even, the camera's at a loss because it's so small. Look at this, do you see that? The camera truly can't handle this. Pathetic, there it is. So this slides over the end of our hose, which can be tricky if there's any burrs on the hose. So basically just like that, if you can see. So that, oh, and I did the thing. You got to put the nut on first. Look at that. Don't be like me. Put this nut on, then put the olive on. And the name for this type of fitting is a compression fitting. They're super common in plumbing. This is basically plumbing. I'm trying to focus on it, but whatever. Now this goes in here, and you just want to get it in there until it bottoms out in the fitting, and then slide your compression nut down over the olive, over your hose, tube, pipe, whatever. And we'll just give a little snuggie. Probably doesn't take much because it's so little, That feels good. All right. Now, go grab a paper towel. We'll clean that up. Some zip ties. We'll run this in through the hole. We'll make our connections in the dash, and we can get on to testing this and see if it all works. Back inside, so I've got that wired up. I'll show you how I've got that tie wired in place. Back with my old pal Splitty Loomy, and we're just gonna loom this up and get it ready, and we're gonna run it, go back outside, we'll run it up through the hole so it pops out over there, but like I was saying earlier, this cannot be cut. You cannot alter the length of this. So once we get back into the passenger compartment, we'll just coil up all of our excess and leave it there. And I suspect that's because the impedance of a wire changes as the length does, and when you have a precision instrument, the impedance of that, it's an electrical term. If you don't know what it means, don't worry about it. But the impedance changes, and precision electrical instruments usually require an impedance that doesn't change, or at least that's known. Okay, look at it. Whoop, 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 whoop. I'm gonna feed this through and out. We'll run it through the hole next to our boost line, and we'll pick this up with our gauges. I'm like in between the wheel and the engine. That's one reason why I love these conventional style buses. Dog nose, if you will. It's just so easy to get, I'm literally in the engine right now. And I'm not even gonna get that dirty. I think we wanna just, right there. And we'll just, we'll cut this zip tie. Should we cut that one and add our own? Yes, that's what we're gonna do. I'm a freaking zip tie master. All these blue hoses, they're actually new. I've redone all of the coolant piping for the original heaters in the bus with this really expensive silicone hose that I had laying around. Look at this stuff, isn't it cool? Got my little bleeder up here. Very nice. Good work, Chuck. How do we best want to? Ooh, yeah, I kind of like that, so we'll give a little more slack. Yeah, that's gonna be good. Very nice. A little more, great. Got a little bit too much of a hook. We'll pull the slack through, zip tie it, boop, get inside. So we've got this guy installed. Isn't that nice? I got my steel tie there, and it goes up, and once we're all set and I heat shrink that, I'm gonna zip tie it to that tube, that big intake pipe. And over here, all of our wiring for our gauges comes out here. This is a water gauge I already had installed, water temperature gauge. But look, we got our split loom with the connector on it. That's gonna go in the back of the pyrometer. Here's our little pressure tube. And what I've got is some wiring. All these gauges are backlit. And so these backlights, they're these little doodads here. And you're gonna wanna wire those up to a lighting circuit. And that's what I've done right now. They're wired up so that they come on whenever my headlights are on. Someday I'll add a dimmer. Then I also have a switched ignition source. So this gets power whenever the ignition is turned on, because we don't want to be powering these gauges 24/7. It's going to give us dead battery. We don't want a dead battery. I've got my 4-hole gauge plate installed. It's kind of funny because, like, you know, that was the only place I could put it and not block these gauges. But it should be pretty good. I'll be able to see these two and those two. It's hard to capture on camera, but pretty clearly. Hooking the peepers. Driving, hooking the peepers. I'm gonna go ahead and wire up the rest of this stuff. There's not much else to explain. It's pretty self-explanatory. This is the plug that goes in the back of the pyrometer, and this is where the ground and power feed that. Should be straightforward, and I'll catch you in a couple seconds when it's time to test this. Hey, look at that. They're all in here. Don't worry about this, okay? I'm gonna worry about that. So I have this is my water temperature gauge. It's gonna go, you know, there obviously, but because it's all mechanical, this cable can actually not be removed from the back of the unit. So I'm gonna have to, you know, wait to install this and remove the thing from up under the hood, but that's all good because I gotta change the water pump and drain the coolant anyways. So what do you say we give it a little tester? So let's pull the lights. Hey, look at that. We got lights, lightage. And now let's do the thing and start it up, shall we? Okay, that's good. Okay. So we should see temperatures on that pyrometer go up pretty fast. And that looks good to me. At 200 degrees or so. And rising. Heck yeah. And no boost yet. So what I'm gonna do, this is an advanced move, all right? You put it in drive, make sure you got your brake on. And I'm actually gonna rev it up. And by putting a load on it, we should see the boost creep up. And we should see a rise in our EGTs happen. You can only do this for about 10 to 20 seconds because you'll overheat your transmission torque converter. So here we go. There's the killer. Awesome. So I think we are in business. Wow, look at, I've always wanted one, you know? And so we should see that number go down really quickly. I mean, relatively speaking, as we sit here and idle. And sure enough, it is. I think we're good there. Turbo sounds good. I'm gonna call this a job well did. Look at that. You know, a wise man once said, knowledge is power. And now that we have the knowledge of the temperature on our engine, we can make more power. You know what I'm saying? That wasn't too bad, you know. The cast iron drilling and tapping, not my favorite, but we got there and we didn't even ruin the turbo. Check. Well, thanks for tuning in. My name's Chuck Cassidy. Make sure you join me just about every week where we do more stuff with buses, because that's, I guess, what I do. We'll see you next time. What a strange life I have, huh?